Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, in which three rabbis from Englewood, New Jersey, each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the Parsha, and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Rabbi Chaim Pupko of Congregation Ava Torah, and I'm joined by my dear friends and colleagues,
Rabbi Akiva Block, Gilad Kesher,
Rabbi Daniel Goldberg, Eitz Chaim, the Englewood Shtibel.
To sponsor an episode of the One Pasuk podcast, visit onepasukpodcast.com and click on the sponsorship link. And please take a moment and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform.
Our pasuk for Parshas Pinchas comes from Perek Chavav, pasuk Yud Aleph. For context, the end of last week's parsha, we had a plague that was set off, that was triggered by the Jewish people cavorting with the Midyanim, and I don't use the word cavorting lightly. The plague was put to an end.
That you used it at all is pretty remarkable.
I know, the word of the day.
Yeah.
The plague was put to a stop by the decisive action of Pinchas, and then after the plague is finished, Hashem commands Moshe to conduct a census. So we begin the census with the tribe of Reuven. By way of discussing the tribe of Reuven, the Parsha harkens back to the death of Dasan and Aviram, who were from the tribe of Reuven. And then by way of that, mentioning the death of Dasan and Aviram in the context of the Korah rebellion, it says, as almost like I don't want to say a throwaway line, but it's really just like an, oh, by the way, parenthetical point. It says, ובני Korah lo mesu, but the children of Korah didn't die. And to me, it's just this short pasuk, comes out of left field. Very interesting that the children didn't die. I think it's interesting that we don't get that tidbit in the context of the tribe of Levi. It's by way of Dasan and Aviram. So the whole thing, to me, it's like Dorsheni. It's like this is worthy of expounding and exploring, and it touches on, I think, a lot of interesting rabbinic literature around the children of Korah, and so I thought it would generate some good conversation. Rabbis, what do you got?
Great pick.
Yeah, really great pick. Job well done, Rabbi Goldberg.
Thank you.
So I agree that this pasuk is absolutely fascinating. Its place in the description of the tribe of Reuven rather than a description of the tribe of Korah. And even more, its description here in Parshas Pinchas and not its description in Parshas Korah in real time is even more remarkable. It would have been an interesting detail to include in the actual story that the children of Korah didn't die. Of course, this isn't the only time in the Torah that details of a particular story are included later and not in the actual first-hand account of the episode. Usually we have that more with Devarim and the rest of the Torah, but be that as it may, it is so fascinating that the report of the children of Korah not dying is mentioned here. Rashi cites the Midrashic comment. He calls together from a number of different Midrashim about the sons of Korah and exactly why it is that they didn't die. Haim hayu be'etza tchila, Rashi says. They were originally a part of the rebellion, the be'etza. They were a part of the plot. Uvishas hamachlokes hirharu tshuva b'libam. And at the time of the machlokes, they were maharher b'tshuva. They thought, they reflected, and they internally, bilibam, they did tshuva. Lefichach nitbatzer lahem makom gavoa b'gehenom. Therefore, nitbatzer is a very interesting word, and the super commentaries on Rashi try to figure out exactly what that word means. But let's just say that a high place in Gehenom was set aside for them, v'yashvu sham, and they sat there. Just fascinating. If the pasuk itself is unclear, the Rashi makes it even more unclear. If they were maharher b'tshuva, if they did tshuva, if they saw the error of their ways, ein lecha davar omid b'fnei tshuva, there's nothing that comes in the face of tshuva. Why were they given a high place in Gehenom? Let them go to Gan Eden. What exactly is Rashi telling us by saying they went to Gehenom, but they had a high place in Gehenom? It's a very bizarre formulation. And it really, I think, lends itself to the ambiguity, maybe the intentional ambiguity of this verse. Were b'nei Korah good people? Were they not good people? The Torah says that they didn't die. The Torah doesn't say that they lived. The Torah just says that they didn't die. They went to Gehenna, but they didn't go all the way to Gehenna. They didn't go to Gan Eden. They went to Gehenna. They had a high place in Gehenna. I think all of these pieces, the fact that it says that they didn't die, but really doesn't talk about them living, the fact that they did tshuva, but didn't really do an outward tshuva, they were just mahar tshuva belibam, they thought to themselves, let's be honest, they fomented a rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu. A hirhur tshuva balev, an internal seeing the error of your ways, is not a full-fledged tshuva. It's maybe a reflection and the beginnings of the tshuva process, but they needed to do the full thing, the whole 9 yards. So all of these kind of half measures, lo mesu but not chayu, hirhur tshuva balev but not a full tshuva, no, but a high place in Gehenna, certainly not Gan Eden, I think lends itself, all these ingredients together bring us to a point of understanding just the general purgatory in which the Bnei Korah found themselves. The Torah is ambiguous here to teach us and tell us the inherent danger in being Baalei Machlokas. When you foment discord and division in the community, that is, if ever there was a sin that is unforgivable, it's this. The Rambam actually in his Hilchos Tshuva says that being Parish Min HaTzibor and actually creating division in the community is one of those sins for which one cannot do tshuva. And one of the commentaries on this pasuk actually say that they had a high place in Gehenna. They were with neither community. They weren't with the people who went all the way down to Gehenna, and they weren't with the people who went to Gan Eden either. They were just in this state of solitude, this purgatory, because Baalei Machlokes do not deserve to be in any community whatsoever. They might have thought that what they did was wrong, but a Baal Machlokes remains a Baal Machlokes, and that's why really the concept of tshuva is not presented before them, because it's a character flaw, the likes of which it is virtually impossible to come back from. The Ramban in his commentary actually says, to be Korach v'cha'adaso is an Isser D'Oraisa. To foment machlokes is an Isser D'Oraisa, and Korach is the model for that. And so the intentional ambiguity is actually to teach us that Bnei Korach were neither here nor there. They might have thought they were righteous, and certain strands in Chazal might actually think they are righteous, but really, you can't really put lipstick on a pig. And at the end of the day, machlokes is machlokes, and this was a sin that was virtually unforgivable, and they really couldn't ever fully come back from it. They had a high place, but they went to Gehenna nonetheless. It's such an important and an illustrative and instructive lesson for us about how to create community. And people are well-intentioned, and they stand on principle, but really their standing on principle is so often just fomenting division, and it's something that we need to really, as a cautionary tale, learn from.
I think it's reflected very clearly in a more fundamental concept. When you mentioned that Rashi, I was thinking there's got to be other examples where somebody was maharher b'tshuva and got credit for it. So I quickly Googled it, and Google reminded me of the Gemara in Kedushin that says that somebody who marries a woman on condition that he's a tzaddik, a righteous person, the Kedushin works because we say maybe he was a maharher b'tshuva. He thought about tshuva.
Everyone's favorite Shabbos Shuvah Drasha Gemara.
Yeah, exactly. So, but why is that theoretical guy considered a tzaddik, but not the Bnei Korach? So perhaps you could say that we don't know what that guy in the Gemara Kedushin did wrong, but perhaps we could say that perhaps his sins were bein adam lamakom, right? There were spiritual sins between him and God, and so to be able to be maharer b'tshuva gets you all the way. But we know that Yom Kippur is not mechaper for sins bein adam l'chavero, right? And so perhaps the maharer b'tshuva that the sons of Korach did was enough to raise them a certain level in terms of bein adam lamakom, but in terms of the damage that they inflicted on Moshe and Aaron, on Klal Yisrael in general, is seen through a bein adam l'chavero lens, interpersonal. And that, you can't just be maharer b'tshuva. You have to ask mechila and do real tshuva.
For this, here's the difference. When the Bnei Korach were literally the ground was swallowing them up, right? So they saw the results of what they were doing. They were maharer b'tshuva. Okay, what kind of tshuva is that? That's tshuva me'yira, tshuva from fear, because they saw what was the result of their actions. But when you say kadsheni al minas shani tzaddik, be mekadesh to me, be mekudeshes to me, on the condition that I'm tzaddik. If he has tshuva, if he's maharer b'tshuva, it's tshuva me'ava, it's tshuva from love. Not bad, right? You got it?
Not bad.
Pretty good. There's something there.
Yeah.
There's something there.
I do very much like the association of the sin of Korach va'adaso as one of Bein Adam l'Chavero, and therefore here her tshuva b'leiv is not enough. It actually reminds us of Chazal's interpretation or understanding of the sin of the Mitzorah and the kapara of the Mitzorah and the shtei tziporim chayos that are sent out. And Rashi cites the Medrash that the bird is sent out to fly away because you can't really ever bring a bird, feathers of a bird are like, they're gone. It's like, you can't really ever get, so same thing with your Lashon Hara. These sins are unforgivable because the damage has been done and there's really no way to ever put the genie back in the bottle. And
an interesting kind of point of contrast would be On ben Peles, who was also one of the original provocateurs, rebels. And he has, Chazal tell us, a wife who is able to set him on the right course before it's too late, right? And if you're fortunate to have that person in your life, so you can redirect, you can correct course and nip it in the bud.
That's another kind of tshuva me'ava.
Oh, nice. Tshuva me'ava, right? Versus this kind of last minute, a day late and a dollar short type of tshuva where it can save you, but maybe not quite to the same extent.
Yeah. I was noticing when I was looking at this pasuk that Korah and Moshe have something in common. The two sides of this machlokas, Moshe and Aaron, they have something in common, and that is that they both had sons that didn't follow in their path. So you have Korah, who was a wicked person, and his sons did not receive the same punishment. On the other side, Moshe Rabbeinu, who's Moshe Rabbeinu, we know his sons did not necessarily carry on his leadership, and seems we're not worthy of the station. And then what's interesting, though, is that Aaron's sons specifically do follow him. Now, it might be baked into the system because Kohanim become Kohanim by birth, but I was thinking perhaps there's just a very simple but important observation to be made on this, and that is that looking through this whole story, so Korach does a lot of talking, Moshe does a lot of talking, and talking and instruction and guidance are very important, especially when setting examples for our kids and teaching our kids. But Aaron is silent. Aaron is silent throughout. And so perhaps what Aaron represents is the notion that children learn so much more from what they see their parents do than from what they say. That we tell our kids lots of things all the time. And they listen to us, and it educates them, and it raises them. But some of the most powerful lessons that our children absorb are just the things that they watch, the things that they see us do, because those are very tangible, very explicit expressions of our values, and they're constant. And not only that, but they're subconscious, right? When you instruct your kid, you give your kid a lesson, so they're processing it through their own mind, their own opinions. And I've always had an issue with God that he gives children minds of their own. But nonetheless, when a kid sees a parent go to minyan, be on time for shul, or not talking in shul, that is something that they're not even processing it. It's just automatically going in as information, like this is important. And it's something to think about as parents, that the things that we do, the decisions that we make that our kids are just watching are some of the most powerful lessons.
maybe you could add, just in terms of the simple read of the pasuk, after all, it would, if indeed Korach's children ended up being righteous, it seems odd that they are referred to virtually throughout Tanakh, certainly in Tehillim. They're always referred to as Bnei Korah. And they're not referred to by name. They're not referred to individually. They're only referred to here too. They're only referred to as Bnei Korach, which means perhaps you could take the children out of Korach's home, but you can't take the Korach's home out of the children. We shouldn't think that children who are able to lift themselves up by their bootstraps and achieve and accomplish and cultivate their own identity, that the way in which they were raised makes no difference. Many people will tell you that if they have gone down a different path, whether for good or for bad, that the lessons and the values on which they were raised continue to be a part of them, even if only subconsciously. And I think all of us, in the members of our own shul, and certainly in our own lives with our own children, I'm sure we see that. Bnei Korach will always be Bnei Korah. It's all the more reason we need to model good behavior for our children.
That's a great observation.
Yeah, I would push back a little bit. I think that we are all a composite of accepting and rejecting what we saw. So we're always in relation to the home we grow up in, but sometimes we're marked by a sense of rejection of I don't want to be that. Like the Michtav Me'Eliyahu talks about how Avram Avinu had to grow up in a home of like the mecca of of idolatry, because that's what then gives him the power to be the ultimate rejecter of idolatry. Sure. You could say, as it's not credit to Korah, but the idea that we have such a robust contribution to Tehillim of Bnei Korah, that it's specifically from going to the other extreme that gives them that ability.
And it could be also there were positive elements in Korach's home.
Yes.
Again, Korach perhaps was well-intentioned.
Yeah.
In contradistinction, by the way, to Dasan and Aviram, who I think maybe the appearance of this pasuk there actually teaches us that Dasan and Aviram were really the instigators in all this. But it actually just occurred to me as I was listening to you talking, Rabbi Goldberg, that there's another example in this week's Parsha of children of a father who went astray, who actually are mentioned by name and were able to chart a different path. And I'm, of course, referring to the daughters of Tzlafchad, who are mentioned by name, all five of them, twice, both here and at the end of the book of Bamidbar. Kivathet Omes, the father was a sinner, the father died, and yet these women were able to actually chart a different path and become really great, positive people.
And you have the Medrash that one says he was the Mikoshesh, and then maybe it's Rabbi Akiva who says, Chas v'shalom, don't slander him as the Mikoshesh. He was one of the Ma'apilim. And if he was one of the Ma'apilim, that means that he was one of these people. He himself had great chibas ha'aretz. It was misplaced. And the daughters are his daughters because they take the virtue and they discard the klipa, right? Yeah. But they are Bnos Tzlafchad in the best sense. So you can be Bnei Korach in the best sense.
So I think if you put all this together, if you put Korach and his children, Tzlafchad and his children, Aaron and his children, Moshe and his children, of course, there's another medrash in this week's Parsha about when Moshe requests from Hashem to appoint his successor, that Moshe actually wanted his sons to take over for him, and Hashem said no. But if you put all these things together, I think the obvious conclusion is that both things are true. A person's destiny is not set in stone because of where they grew up or who raised them. But if we think it doesn't matter, we are sorely mistaken. And our children are individuals who are responsible for their own decision-making. But we should always remember that how we raise them and the behavior we model for them and the lessons we teach them matters a great deal. And we learn from all these different pieces in the Parsha put together that perhaps that's the case.
I can see in very clear ways how in my teens and my 20s and my 30s, I tried to make my own identity, and that the older I get in certain ways, I become more and more like my father, completely.
Hear that?
That's a profound reflection. I'll just add one nukuda, because I think we really covered a lot of the things that were on my mind. But just one other point, which I think is fascinating, and this ties back to what you were just saying about the Bnei Korach. The Medrash says that they go to this high place in Gehenna, at which point they sing Shira. Now, these are the sons of Korach, who are Leviim, whose job is to sing Shira. And they go and they sing Shira. And then we have, for all time, the contribution of their descendants who sing Shira in the Beis HaMikdash. I think we do actually know that Heman is one of the authors in Tehillim. There are 10 authors.
David HaMelech and 10 authors, yeah.
10, right. Yudatun. And so, to me, that line between the children of Korach singing Shira in Gehenna and then having children, almost like a Masorah, like a tradition that goes to our Beis HaMikdash of singing Tehillim and singing Shira during the Avodah. To me, it was just so evocative. It's so interesting to have that connection of this is the song. I'm taking it one step further, but this is the song of our forebears that they sang in Gehenna, singing Shira to Hashem in this moment of destruction and calamity. And I don't know, to me, just that through line is so fascinating. I don't know that I have a particular point, but it's so provocative to me.
To me, it's a powerful lesson, first of all, in Chazal, allowing for Shira, this part of the Avot. It's so holy. They allow for it to be sung in Gehenna. And that perhaps the lesson is that even when a person has sunk to a place that they didn't intend to be in, they can still model, they can still grab onto something that's part of their heritage, something that's important.
And yet, as we now with Parshas Pinchas have started the 3 weeks, in Al Naharos Bavel, in Tehillim Perek Kuf Lamed Zayin, which is customarily recited by some all the time, by some just during the 9 days, the heathen armies say to the Jewish people as they're going out into exile, Shiru lanu mi shir Tzion, sing to us the songs of Zion. And the people respond, Eich nashir es shir Hashem al admas nechar. How could we possibly sing the songs of Hashem on foreign soil and foreign lands? So it is true, these songs, the Shira, the Meshorim of the sons of Korah, they're accessible always. And yet we should also recognize during this time of mourning, during the Bein HaMetzarim, that there's still something missing. And maybe the reason why it's actually the sons of Korah that end up being the Meshorim is to teach us that we shouldn't think that we've reached the pinnacle, and maybe there's something more for us to reach out to. And the song, as beautiful as it is and as harmonious as it may be, is coming from the mouths of those who foment machlokes, is still somewhat tainted. Shkayach, everyone.
Shkaf.
Go off.
Vihi lo